Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. According to local authorities, at least 5 people were killed and 35 others injured when a suspected suicide bomber detonated explosives inside a mosque during evening prayers in Maiduguri, capital of Nigeria's Borno state, while so far no group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Acting chairman of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Tariq-e-Rahman, has arrived in Dhaka after nearly 17 years in exile. He has emerged as a leading contender for Prime Minister ahead of the February 12th elections, as he was cleared of corruption and other charges after ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted. The Tanzania's Civil Aviation Authority said a helicopter crashed near Barafu camp on Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro, killing 5 people, including a pilot, a doctor, a guide, and 2 foreign tourists. The aircraft was on a medical rescue mission and went down at about 4,700 meters on Africa's highest peak. Saudi Arabia said it hopes Yemen's Southern Transitional Council will end an escalation after UAE-backed forces seized control of the southern provinces of Hadramaut and Mahara. Saudi Arabia said a joint Saudi-Emirati military delegation arrived in Aden on December 12 to press for an urgent STC withdrawal and amid Yemeni backlash over forced invasion of the Yemeni islands. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents shot a man during an operation in Maryland after the driver of the van allegedly rammed federal vehicles and drove towards officers, prompting agents to open fire yesterday, as local police now investigate the incident. Torrential rains unleashed widespread flash flooding and mud flows across Southern California. Fire Department spokesperson Christopher Prater said that in the east of Los Angeles, emergency crews spent much of the day answering dozens of rescue calls and pulling drivers to safety. The White House has ordered U.S. military forces to focus almost exclusively on enforcing a quarantine of Venezuelan oil for at least the next 2 months. U.S. official says military options still exist, but focus is on economic pressure, while Venezuela says U.S. government is the threat, not Venezuela. 14 countries, including Britain, Canada, and Germany, have condemned the Israeli Security Cabinet's approval of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, saying they violate international law and risk fueling instability. Now we look on how the Christmas is celebrated in Iraq. Iraqi Christians in the town of Karakosh gathered for Christmas Eve Mass, continuing a long-held tradition despite years of hardship. The town, once the largest Christian community in Iraq, was emptied in 2014 when ISIS seized the area, forcing residents to flee. Although many families have since immigrated, those who return filled churches such as Al-Tahira Al-Kubra and Mar Behnam and Sarah Church with hymns, prayers, and candlelight services. Clergy and worshippers spoke of faith, resilience, and hope for peace. Let's listen in.
نحن نشعر في هذه المنطقة الأمان جيد جدا، ونحن سعداء مع أهلنا وأخواننا الموجودين حاليا معنا في قضاء قراقوش. وأنا جئت من السويد، كنت عايش هناك 20 سنة، والآن أنا هون موجود بين أهلي وأحبابي وأصدقائي.
قبل النزوح يعني كانت الأعياد يعني أكثر بهجة، لأن الكل العائلة تكون ملتمة، يعني الأخوة والأخوات الأم والأب. هسه يعني نص العائلة متهجرة خارج العراق.
خارج المنطقة مالتهم كانوا يشعلون النار وكانوا يسهرون على قطيعهم اللي يتمثل بحياتهم الروحية والإيمانية. فإجا ملاك الرب وبشرهم هذه البشارة العظيمة، البشارة الكبيرة بميلاد ربنا يسوع المسيح مخلصا لهذا العالم. فاليوم نحن أخذنا أيضا هذا الرمز اللي هو رمز الشعلة، أيضا نقيدها في الكنائس التي تسبق القداس الاحتفالي دلالة على أنه نحن مثل الرعاة سهرانين وأيضا مستعدين لاستقبال ربنا يسوع.
Now we move on to Israel. Israel has strongly condemned criticism from 14 countries, including Britain and France, over its approval of new settlements in the occupied West Bank, calling the objections discriminatory and morally wrong. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar said foreign governments have no right to restrict Jewish settlement in what Israel calls the land of Israel, adding the move was driven partly by security concerns. Israel's cabinet recently approved 11 new settlements and formalized 8 others. Several countries said the decision violates international law and threatens efforts towards a two-state solution. They warned the move could undermine regional stability, including a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. The Palestinian Authority also condemned the decision, accusing Israel of deepening control over Palestinian land. The United Nations says settlement expansion has reached its highest level in years. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Dr. Kochhar, for joining us again, and Merry Christmas to you. Now, looking at this, what is Israel's defense or reasoning in, their expansion of the settlements, and what responsibility do they have as a occupying force in these regions?
Thank you, and a Merry Christmas to you also, and to all the viewers. The reasons why Israel is getting into this kind of settlements is there are 3 major reasons as far as I can analyze. One is the domestic political drivers, a certain amount of pressure from the right-wing parties, because you know that Israel government is a coalition government and dominated by the right-wing elements. So right-wing elements basically push this agenda as far as the Israel government is concerned for those settlements. The second is the historical or the geographical perspective, because Israel views Judea and Samaria as integral to its own historical legacy, and therefore Jerusalem is one area where it considers as own area, and we will not compromise the two-state solution as far as this is concerned. And the third important aspect is the security, because after the 7th October incident, Israel actually visualizes that it wants to populate its own areas which are vulnerable to its own security from the Palestinians who are staying already there in the West Bank. So the first thing it gives is the strategic depth, I can say, against terrorism, because if its own people are there, he'll be able to secure that area better. Secondly, population buffers against vulnerable corridors is also an important aspect when we analyze this entire issue. The international community, of course, is totally against this viewpoint, because first of all, it's a violation of international law, and it's also an obstacle to the two-state solution, because more and more migrants, if you start bringing them into these pockets, then the two-state solution becomes very, very difficult to implement. And I think Israel is also sending a strategic signal here to all those Western countries as well as to all the countries of the world, that it is not ready yet for a two-state solution, and it is already creating grounds of physical occupation in these areas, that whenever a situation comes for a two-state, it will not give up these areas, and it will call these areas as its own area. So these are those important factors. Summing it up, domestic historic, security, and political.
Yes, Major General and Doctor, thank you for summing it up for us. And how common is it for an occupying force to push forward and expand their settlements like Israel is doing? Can international condemnation make any difference towards them?
See, if we look at the past track record of what has been happening in Gaza and how the Israel Defense Forces have caused a kind of a mayhem there, and so many 70,000 odd people have been killed, and most of them are innocent people. And there have been large-scale condemnation from so many countries of the world, even the United Nations also. The issue was taken up in the Security Council, but with the help of the United States, it got vetoed a number of times. So I think as long as the United States is with Israel, which I presume that in this decision also, this has the concurrence or the tacit concurrence of the United States. So as far as Israel is concerned, I don't think any kind of international pressure will work on Israel as long as United States is there with it. Second important aspect is the stand of the Gulf countries or the stand of the Arabian nations, because what we are seeing is that though most of the Arab countries do condemn everything what Israel is doing, but on ground we don't see any tangible sanctions or harsh measures against Israel, and that is the reality, because every country is looking for its own national interest, and most of these Gulf countries or Arabian countries in this region of West Asia are largely dominated by the United States. So I don't think that a kind of pressure from the Muslim countries will also work on Israel, and especially with this peace plan also coming, though on ground I don't think there is much of peace in Gaza as of now, because every day we are hearing incidents of ceasefire violations, and each side is blaming the other. So
Yes.
To conclude this this argument,
Yes.
I don't think any amount of pressure is going to work on Israel.
Thank you for highlighting that, Major General Dr. Kochar. Please stay with us as we come back to you for next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Turkey, the Istanbul's chief prosecutor says that Turkish authorities have detained 115 suspected Islamic State members. They've said that they were planning to carry out attacks on Christmas and New Year celebrations in the country. According to the prosecutor's office, Istanbul police have obtained information that Islamic State members had planned attacks in Turkey against non-Muslims, in particular during Christmas and New Year celebrations. The police raided 124 places in Istanbul, capturing 115 of the 137 suspects. They were seeking several ammunition, pistols, and other firearms, which were also seized in the raid by the police. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back retired Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar. He's an international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General Doctor, for staying with us. Now, what challenges does Turkey face in preventing, such extremist attacks so often, while maintaining social cohesion among its diverse communities?
You see, this problem of the Islamic State is predominant in Turkey because geographically, if you look at Turkey, it provides a logistical corridor for these Islamic terrorists between Europe, Syria, and Iraq, and therefore Turkey, or especially Ankara, feels that this is a important direction to stop this movement of the ISIS. And if you go back into history, you will also see that these Islamic State cells in Turkey have earlier also targeted tourist hubs, diplomatic missions, and political gatherings. So I think today Turkey is facing a problem because Islamic State remnants are still there in Turkey, and PKK linked threats are also available there, and spillover risks from Syria. See, what is happening in actually Syria is bound to affect Turkey. The Northern Liberation Army is there on the Turkish border, on the northern uh, side of Syria. So that is also one concern for Turkey, because frequent clashes are taking place between the security forces and these forces, rebel forces in Syria. And the spillover of these terrorists also is possible. So Turkey is being a part of NATO. Turkey has a responsibility as per the NATO charter also to ensure that it limits the influence of Islamic State in its own areas. And this is a very important part of its counter terrorism posture, because Turkey has been maintaining for quite some time a counter-terrorism posture that it doesn't want these people to get inside and create a situation for the Turkish forces. And also intelligence is playing a very important role here, because Turkey is able to get this kind of intelligence, and it is therefore we see the arrest of such a large number of Islamic terrorists or militants in this area.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to South America. The White House has ordered U.S. military forces to focus almost exclusively on enforcing a quarantine of Venezuelan oil for at least the next 2 months, indicating that Washington is currently more interested in using economic rather than military means to pressure Caracas. This comes as Trump has previously accused the South American country of flooding the U.S. with drugs, and his administration has for months been bombing boats originating in South America that it alleges were carrying drugs. Many nations have condemned the attacks as extrajudicial killings, while Trump has also frequently threatened to start bombing drug infrastructure on land and has authorized covert CIA activity directed at Caracas. In fact, so far this month, the U.S. Coast Guard has intercepted 2 tankers in the Caribbean Sea, both fully loaded with Venezuelan crude. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Colin Chong-Yu-Keith. He's a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you, and Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. Now looking at
Same
this,
to you.
Thank you. Now looking at this, what do you think, why U.S. has suddenly, moved from military pressure for a few months, using military pressure for a few months to economic one? Is economic pressure more influencing the behavior of but Venezuelan government in this case?
Yes, it is a mixture of different approaches. We have seen how also it is also being used in parallel with hard power capacity, and Washington is using this calibrated maritime pressure, not simply to punish Venezuela alone, but also to send very strong signal to traders, to rivals, to partners that the U.S. intends to control this space where sanctions enforcement will intersect with this global supply security. And we have seen how the key audience is not only about Venezuela, it's about the network of these vast shadow fleets, insurers, middlemen, offshore brokers. So it is basically declaring that sanctions evasion has moved from this financial domain into this maritime security domain, and Washington will be hell-bent to protect these interests. So this quarantine will strengthen Washington's short-term leverage, but it could also be, it could also harden strategic resistance in parts of Latin America that will remain wary of any potential U.S. maritime intervention. But we have seen how this greatest escalation risk is not about strategic intent; it's about operational friction at sea. Miscalculation, misjudgments could trigger new political crisis. But we have seen how over the past couple of months now, this mixture of different strategies being used by Washington, of course, also to send a very strong signal, a strong message to Venezuela, but also, of course, also to different partners, to different players in Latin America, but most importantly also to ensure that this, has this ripple effects on the, third parties, not only within this region, but especially with China. And of course, also we have seen how with the new national security strategy being unveiled a couple of weeks ago, this is the core area that has been given the most emphasis by the Trump administration to ensure that the security interests of the U.S. and of course the safety and security and interests of the American people will be always prioritized. And this is how it has been done. Unlike the weak measures being put in place by the previous administration. So this is a calculated move by Washington, and we will see in the next couple of weeks now how this will turn out for Venezuela.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. And Professor, what are the legal, geopolitical, and strategic implications of enforcing an oil quarantine for the next 2 months against Venezuela? How effective can this be?
Well, this has been a core point of contention, of course, especially by the nations in Latin America, and of course there have been greater support being given by Russia and China to the cause of Venezuela in trying to frame this narrative where the actions being taken by Washington have not been in line with international norms and the international law. But of course also we have seen how the ultimate priority and interest now will be to ensure this near-front capacity and has been secured, and that all this narcotic infiltration of drugs and have been stopped. And this is the core priorities of the Trump administration. So regardless of this narrative building, regardless of all this opaque and vague jurisdictions of where maritime security as opposed to international maritime norms and law, I don't foresee any kind of backing down from the Trump administration in terms of fulfilling one of his core manifestos of securing the southern border and to ensure that the root cause of the problem has been tackled, which has been now being done for the past couple of months now. For the next couple of weeks and months, we will see greater narrative building by regional powers. Also, this intervention and of course the support system being given by other powers to ensure that this narrative stays ahead, and that but there won't be any kind of hard power countermeasures for the risk of greater responses by the U.S. I don't see any kind of greater support being given in terms of hard power capacity by Russia or China or by Iran, and Venezuela, the regime of Maduro would then be, basically be left alone on most parts. Of course, also we have seen some responses by the neighbors, but he has yet to create this new resistance that can rival or that can provide this risk to the actions being taken by the unrivaled naval might of the U.S. As what we have seen now for the past couple of weeks.
And Professor, lastly, building on your answer, Russia and China and Brazil have all spoken out in support of Venezuela, but can they help with any action? If so, what would that look like?
As I've stated, I don't foresee any kind of substantive measures being offered, apart from, of course, narrative building and, of course, the messaging capacity. But we have seen also how the increased Chinese presence in this part of the world, in Latin America, has also compelled these greater countermeasures being taken by the Trump administration. And of course, for Russia, and of course for China also, we have seen how it's a two-pronged, encirclement of the U.S. in terms of the southern border, in terms of also at the northern side, and how Trump has responded forcefully in terms of, prioritizing the importance of Greenland. And this is how it's a calculated move, but I don't see any kind of, efficacy in that response, in that kind of response, and that, and they are well aware of how, of the intent of the Trump administration to secure this region, and of course to prevent further intrusion of external powers, especially by Russia and China, and that this forms one of the core essence of the new national security strategy to secure the Western Hemisphere and to secure the border and the interests of the U.S. and of course also to act as a barrier in terms of this further power intrusion by China and Russia, and this relates also to this new move have this kind of the new strategy of the Golden Dome, the Trump naval class ship and all that. So this is a consolidated strong message to the adversaries of the United States, and that it's a core traditional strategic move by Trump, and I don't see that this can be rivaled anywhere and anytime soon for the next couple of weeks or months from now.
Very enlightening. With that, I would like to thank Professor Collins Chong-Kyu-Keith for joining us from Kuala Lumpur and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Russia. Russia has said that its armed forces have gained control over the settlement in Zaporizhia region in southeastern Ukraine, while Ukraine has said that its armed forces have attacked multiple Russian strategic infrastructure. The Russian Ministry of Defense has said that in its latest report, Russian forces have brought under control the Zarechnoye settlement in Zaporizhia region and attacked Ukrainian troops in the direction of Sumy and Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine over the past 24 hours. The ministry has also said that over the past day, Russian forces have struck Ukrainian military industrial enterprises, energy facilities, transportation, infrastructure, and temporary deployment points of Ukrainian troops and foreign mercenaries across 147 locations. Meanwhile, the report says that a synthetic rubber plant, which was located in the Russian city of Yefremov in the Tula region and was used to produce components for plastic explosives and key raw materials for solid rocket fuel, was also attacked. It also reported that the Ukrainian forces struck a Russian base for unmanned vessel storage and maintenance in Crimea. Now we move on to Honduras. Honduras' Nasri Asfura, the conservative businessman backed by the US President Donald Trump, and is making his first address to the nation on Christmas Eve after he was declared as the winner of the razor-thin election, marred by delays and allegations of fraud. Asfura has said that may this Christmas find Honduras more humane and more brotherly. It is a time for reconciliation, unity, and peace. Let's listen in.
Honduras, en Nochebuena celebramos el nacimiento de Jesús, el príncipe de la paz. Y su llegada nos recuerda que el amor es más poderoso que cualquier división. Que esta Navidad nos encuentre más humanos y más hermanos. Es tiempo de reconciliación, de unidad y
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.